The call came at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. I know the exact time because I had just looked at the clock on my nightstand, thinking I should turn off the lamp and get some sleep. I'm 67 years old and I don't sleep the way I used to, but I was trying. Then my phone buzzed against the wood and I saw my daughter's number on the screen, and something in my chest went cold before I even answered. Not because I had a bad feeling, because my daughter never called me that late. Not once in the 38 years she had been alive. Dad. Her voice was strange, thin, like she was speaking from the bottom of a well. Dad, I need you to come to Sunridge Care Center, right now. I sat up. Jennifer? What happened? Are you hurt? A pause. Too long. It's not me. It's you I'm worried about. Just come, okay? Don't tell anyone. Just come. She hung up. I sat in the dark for a moment, my hand still holding the phone. Sunridge Care Center was the long-term care facility in Burlington where I had been placed 6 months ago, not because I couldn't take care of myself, but because my son-in-law Marcus had convinced my daughter that my memory was slipping, that I needed supervision, that it wasn't safe for me to be alone in the house I had owned for 31 years. I had agreed to a 30-day assessment. Somehow, it had become 6 months. I pulled on my cardigan and walked down the corridor to the small room that had become my world. 340 square feet. A window overlooking a parking lot. A photograph of my late wife Patricia on the dresser, and beside it, a framed photo of Jennifer at her university graduation, smiling so wide you could see every tooth. I looked at that photo for a long moment before I left the room. Sunridge was a 12-minute drive from the facility my daughter lived in the house now. My house. The one in Aldershot with the Japanese maple in the front yard that Patricia had planted the year Jennifer was born. Marcus drove a leased Audi Q7 he couldn't afford, and kept telling me the housing market made it impossible for them to find anything suitable. They had moved in temporarily 8 months ago. The temporary had a way of becoming permanent when no one pushed back. I had a car. The staff here couldn't stop me from leaving. I was a voluntary resident, not a patient. I reminded myself of that as I signed out at the front desk, nodding at the night attendant who looked surprised to see me going anywhere at midnight. The drive felt strange. Burlington in November is a particular kind of quiet. The streets along New Street were empty and wet from earlier rain. The Tim Hortons on the corner, already dark. I drove slowly, not because my driving was bad, my driving was fine. Whatever Marcus had told my doctor, but because I needed to think before I arrived. Jennifer had sounded afraid, but not of something that had happened. Afraid of something that was about to happen. I pulled into the driveway of my own house and sat in the car for a moment, looking at it. The lights were on in the kitchen. It was after midnight. Before I could open the car door, the front door opened and Jennifer slipped out. She was wearing a coat over her pajamas, her hair loose, her face without makeup. She looked like she was 18 again, the way she used to look when she'd had a bad dream and came to find me. She looked over her shoulder before she walked to my car. Then she got in the passenger seat and pulled the door shut quietly. "Don't turn on the interior light," she said. I didn't. For a moment we sat in the dark car in the driveway of my own house, and I waited. "Dad," she said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to promise me you won't do anything tonight. Just listen." "I'm listening," I said. She took a breath. "Marcus has been talking to Uncle Derek. Derek is my younger brother. We hadn't spoken in 4 years, not since a dispute over our mother's estate that ended with lawyers and silence. Derek had always believed he deserved more than he received. He had never quite forgiven the world for the fact that I was the one who went to university, who built a career, who married well. He was the kind of man who kept score in a ledger only he could read. "What kind of talking?" I said. It wasn't a question. Jennifer pressed her hands together in her lap. "Marcus found out that your financial power of attorney, the one you signed when you first came to Sunridge, lists Derek as the secondary agent. After me, I knew this. My lawyer in Oakville had drawn up the documents years ago. The primary agent was Jennifer. If Jennifer was unable to act, authority passed to Derek. It had seemed reasonable at the time. It seemed like a formality. It seemed like the kind of thing you signed and never thought about again. Marcus has been telling Derek that you're not competent," Jennifer said. Her voice was very quiet. "He's been sending him things, screenshots. He recorded a conversation with you at Sunridge last month. I don't know how, where you got confused about what day it was. I remembered that conversation. Marcus had come for a visit on a Sunday and spent 20 minutes asking me what the date was, what year it was, whether I remembered what I had eaten for breakfast. I had thought it was strange. I had thought he was being unusually attentive. "He's going to apply to have you declared incapable," Jennifer said, "legally, through the Consent and Capacity Board. If it goes through, Derek becomes the financial power of attorney. And Marcus has an agreement with Derek." She stopped. She pressed her lips together. "They're going to sell the house, Dad, and your RSP, and your investment accounts. Derek gets 40%. Marcus and I get 60. I sat very still. Outside, a car passed on the street. Its headlights swept across the maple tree, bare now, its branches like the lines on an open hand. "How long have you known?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. That told me something. "Jennifer." "3 weeks," she said. "I found messages on Marcus's laptop. I wasn't snooping, I was looking for a file for work. He lets me use it sometimes, and I saw the email thread with Derek." She turned to look at me. In the dark, her eyes were wet. "Dad, I want you to know that I didn't agree to this. I never agreed to this. I've been trying to figure out what to do for 3 weeks. And I couldn't. I didn't know how to." "It's all right," I said. "It's not all right." "No," I said. "It isn't. But I need you to go back inside now and behave exactly as you have been. Don't let Marcus know you've spoken to me." "Dad, I'm a retired accountant," I said. "I spent 34 years auditing financial records for a living. I have found fraud in places where no one thought fraud existed. I found a discrepancy of $43 in a municipal budget that turned out to be $300,000 of embezzlement." I put my hand over hers. "I'm going to need you to trust me and watch." I drove back to Sunridge in the dark. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the chair by my window and I thought about the Japanese maple in the front yard, the one Patricia had planted when Jennifer was 6 weeks old. Patricia had said she wanted the baby to grow up with a tree, something to measure herself against each year, something that would still be there when she was grown. Patricia had been gone for 9 years. The maple was still there. I was not going to let them sell my house. The next morning I called my lawyer, not the one in Oakville. He was semi-retired and I wasn't sure he had the energy for what I needed. I called Heather Kaminska, a litigation lawyer in Hamilton, whom I had met at a community legal clinic 2 years earlier. She specialized in elder law and capacity disputes. I had kept her card because I am the kind of man who keeps cards. I told her everything Jennifer had told me. Then I told her what I needed. "First thing," Heather said, "you need a capacity assessment done privately by a physician of your choosing before Marcus can arrange for one through the Consent and Capacity Board. If your assessment shows you're fully capable, and from this conversation, I have absolutely no doubt that it significantly undermines any application he makes." "What else?" "Second thing, you need to document everything. Your financial accounts, your assets, any communications with Marcus or Derek. If they've already taken any steps, if any account access has been attempted, we need to know that." "I check my accounts online every Sunday," I said. "Nothing unusual as of 4 days ago." "Good. We're going to move quickly." A pause. "Mr. Hayes, I want to ask you something directly. Your daughter, you believe she's genuinely trying to help you?" I thought about Jennifer's face in the dark car, the way she had looked over her shoulder before coming outside. "I believe she's trying to correct a mistake," I said. "I think that's the best any of us can do." The capacity assessment took place 5 days later. Dr. Anand Sharma, a geriatric psychiatrist at Joseph Brant Hospital, spent 2.5 hours with me. We talked about current events, about mathematics, about my career, about my memories of Patricia, about the layout of the house in Aldershot. He asked me to recall a list of words after a 20-minute delay. He asked me to copy a diagram. He asked me what the date was, what the season was, what the name of the current prime minister was. I answered everything correctly. I answered some things with more detail than he required. At the end, he shook my hand and said, "Mr. Hayes, in my professional opinion, you are entirely capable of managing your personal and financial affairs." I thanked him and drove back to Sunridge and called Heather. 2 weeks later, Heather's office received a formal notice. Marcus had filed an application to the Consent and Capacity Board, supported by a letter from a physician I had never met, a Dr. Callum Reyes, whose office was in Mississauga. The letter described me as showing significant cognitive impairment, affecting memory, orientation, and executive function. It referenced the conversation Marcus had recorded. I had expected this. Heather had expected this. What Marcus had not expected was that we had already filed Dr. Sharma's assessment, 12 pages of detailed findings, with the board. What he had not expected was that Heather had filed a request for Dr. Ray's records, his notes, his basis for the assessment and assessment. It turned out he had conducted over a single 40-minute phone call, during which he had apparently relied entirely on Marcus's description of my behavior. A physician cannot diagnose cognitive incapacity based on a third-party phone call, Heather told me. This is a serious problem for Dr. Reyes. How serious? I asked. College of Physicians and Surgeons serious, she said. I want to be honest about something. During those weeks, I was not always steady. There were nights when I sat in my small room at Sunridge and felt the weight of what was happening pressed down on me in a way that made it hard to breathe. Not fear of losing the house, though, that was real. Not even anger at Marcus, though that was real too. It was Jennifer. I kept thinking about the 3 weeks she had known. 3 weeks of sitting across from Marcus at the kitchen table in my house, eating meals, watching television, going to bed while this was happening. I understood why she hadn't acted immediately. I understood the particular paralysis of discovering that someone you love is capable of something you couldn't have imagined. But understanding something and not feeling it are different things. I called her every few days. We kept the conversations ordinary. How are you? Fine. How was work? Fine. It's getting cold. It is. We didn't talk about Marcus. We didn't talk about Derek. We talked around the edges of everything that mattered, the way you talk when you know someone might be listening. Once she called me late at night, and when I answered, she didn't say anything for a moment. I just wanted to hear your voice, she said finally. I'm here, I said. I know. Another pause. I'm sorry, Dad. I know you are, I said. Go to sleep. The Consent and Capacity Board hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in early December. I wore the gray suit Patricia had always said made me look distinguished. I sat beside Heather at a table in a room in Hamilton, and across from us sat Marcus and Derek and their lawyer, a young man from Brampton who kept adjusting his tie. Marcus looked confident when he came in. He had the particular confidence of someone who has calculated the odds and decided they are in his favor. He had the recording. He had the physician's letter. He had a prepared narrative. A concerned son-in-law. A deteriorating father-in-law. A family trying to protect an elderly man from himself. What he did not have was Jennifer. She had agreed to testify. It had taken 3 weeks of careful, quiet conversations before she was ready. She understood what it meant not just for the case, but for her marriage. She understood that Marcus would not forgive this. She came anyway. She sat in the witness area, and she described finding the emails. She described the agreement between Marcus and Derek. She described the conversation she had overheard 2 months earlier, before she found the emails, when Marcus was on the phone with Derek and said, in a voice she didn't recognize, the old man is good for at least $400,000 if we time it right. The young lawyer from Brampton objected 4 times. He was overruled 3 times, and the 4th time the adjudicators simply looked at him until he sat down. Dr. Reyes was not present. He had submitted a letter withdrawing his assessment, citing insufficient clinical basis. Heather had predicted this. Derek sat very still throughout. He is 63 years old, and he has spent his life being the smaller version of something. I looked at him once, across the table, and he looked away. Marcus did not look away. He looked at me with an expression I can only describe as recalculation. He was a man who had placed a bet and was watching it lose in real time, adjusting his understanding of what he would do next. The board's decision came 11 days later. Application denied. Robert Hayes is a capable adult. The application is found to have been made without adequate clinical basis and with apparent financial motivation. That was the language. Apparent financial motivation. Heather called to read it to me. When she finished, there was a brief silence on the line. Is that enough? I asked. I meant, is there more that can be done? The college complaint against Dr. Reyes is already filed, she said. And I forwarded the documentation to the Ontario Securities Commission regarding the agreement between Marcus and Derek, because some of what they discussed regarding your investment accounts may constitute attempted financial fraud. A pause. It won't move quickly. These things rarely do, but it will move. What about Marcus? He's not going to be charged today, she said, but he's been named in the OSC referral. That follows him. And Jennifer has grounds for divorce proceedings, in which this documentation will be highly relevant. I thought about that. Thank you, Heather. Thank me by staying out of Sunridge, she said. You don't belong in there. I moved back to the house on a Friday in mid-December. The Japanese maple was bare, just the dark branches against a gray Hamilton sky. But when I pulled into the driveway and looked at it, I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't known was tight. Marcus had moved out the week before. He hadn't contested it. Jennifer had asked him to leave, and he had left, taking the leased Audi and 2 suitcases and whatever calculations he was making about his next move. I don't know what those calculations were. I found I didn't much care. Jennifer was there when I arrived. She had made tea and put it on the kitchen table, the good mugs that had been Patricia's, and she sat across from me in a way that reminded me of when she was small and had done something wrong and come to find me, not to confess, but just to be near me while she figured out how to live with it. We drank the tea. Outside, the neighbor's dog was barking at something. I should have told you sooner, she said. Yes, I said. You should have. She nodded. She already knew that. I was afraid, she said. Not of Marcus. I mean, yes, of Marcus. But also of you, of what you'd think of me. That I'd known and stayed. She turned the mug in her hands. I kept telling myself I was gathering information. That I needed to be sure. But really, I think I just couldn't stand for you to know that I'd stayed in that house, eating dinner with him, while he was doing that to you. I looked at my daughter for a long moment. She has her mother's eyes. She has always had her mother's eyes. You came to me in the dark, I said. In the middle of the night, in your pajamas. You came. She didn't say anything. That's what I'll remember, I said. She pressed her lips together. Then she picked up her mug and looked out the window at the gray sky. And I could see her trying not to cry, trying to hold it together, which is a habit she has had since she was 9 years old, and which she gets from me. Derek called yesterday, I said. She looked at me. What did he say? He said he wanted to explain, that Marcus had approached him and he'd made a mistake. I drank my tea. He said he was sorry. Are you going to forgive him? I thought about my brother, the ledger he kept, the years of distance, the fact that he had heard what Marcus was proposing and instead of calling me, had signed the agreement. I don't know, I said. Maybe eventually. Forgiveness is something I've always thought of as for yourself, more than for the other person. It's not a gift you give them. It's a weight you put down. I set my mug on the table. I'm not ready to put it down yet. But I don't intend to carry it forever. Jennifer nodded slowly. Outside, the dog had stopped barking. The kitchen was quiet and warm and smelled like tea and like the house it had always been. The house where my daughter grew up, where Patricia used to stand at that window and watch the maple change color in October. I was home. I want to say something to anyone watching this who is in a similar situation. Not as a cautionary tale, not as a success story, just as someone who came through it. There are people who look at an elderly person and see a balance sheet. They see accounts and properties and the accumulated weight of a life's work, and they start doing arithmetic. Sometimes those people are strangers. Sometimes, and this is the harder thing to say, they are people you love, or people who have married into your family, or people who share your name. I am 67 years old. I worked for 34 years as a forensic accountant. I am not confused. I am not diminished. I am slower in some ways and faster in others. And I have lived long enough to know the difference between someone who is worried about you and someone who is worried about what you're worth. The consent and capacity board process is real, and it exists to protect people. But like any process, it can be misused by someone who knows how to file paperwork and find a cooperative physician. What it cannot overcome is documentation, records. A clear-eyed lawyer, a daughter who comes to you in the dark and tells you the truth. I still check my accounts every Sunday. I still keep records of everything, filed by date, in the gray cabinet in the study. Patricia used to say I could find a discrepancy in a grocery list. She wasn't wrong. The maple will come back in April. It always does. That's the thing about trees. They look like they're finished in November, all bare and cold and stripped down to the frame. But they're not finished, they're just waiting. So am I.